Hello, everyone. Welcome to the fourth Monday of the spring 2017 semester. I have the pleasure of introducing Amber Sheeler. Amber received her BS in accounting from North Carolina Wesleyan in 2002 and her MS in accounting from ECU in 2005. She joined the faculty in 2010 as an adjunct and then as a full-time instructor of accounting in 2013. Prior to joining Wesleyan, she served as a controller for Kendall Auto Auction, a freshman pre-major advisor here at Wesleyan from 2003 to 2005, and after that, an audit supervisor with McGladrey and Pullen. Since joining the faculty, Amber has become an invaluable member of the division. She began an accounting lab to help students in all accounting courses and works diligently to ensure that her students achieve their learning objectives. It is my pleasure to welcome each of you and to introduce Amber for her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. As you know now, I'm Amber Sheeler, which I think just about everybody in here knows who I am. Just make sure that everybody can hear me okay as I'm speaking. I usually talk pretty loud. I'm used to talking over students and children. So, my presentation today is on teaching across generations and creating dynamic and engaging classroom experiences. And really where this actually stemmed from is over the past couple of years, the thing that I have really struggled with, and I'm sure that you have struggled with it as well, has been students in the classroom, especially with their phones. Trying to get students to actually pay attention to what I was saying, and they do seem like they're paying attention half the time, but the other half of the time they look like they're playing with their phone, they're playing games, they're doing Facebook, they're doing other things. I am the type that I like the class to be engaging. I like them to have discussion and be very interactive, and so I kept trying to figure out different ways to get these students that I was dealing with to actually interact and sort of focus on me instead of everything else that was going outside in the world. And so as I sat and thought about it, I was watching TV one night and I saw the latest edition of Survivor came on, and it was Millennials versus Gen X. And I started listening to what they were saying. I was listening to what the different tribes were talking about, and they were talking about their different characteristics. And I started wondering if what I was hearing and what they were saying, some of the difference in the characteristics, were some of the same things that we were dealing with in the classroom and why we were struggling. And so I started to look at what characteristics each generation has. Now, I only looked at 4. There's another one, it's called the lost generation at this point. It is beyond the silent or the traditionalist, but I only focused on these 4 because this is typically what we end up seeing. So you have first of all, when I started looking at these, different information that I looked at had different ranges for the dates. So this is sort of an average of what I saw within the birth dates. So you have the silent and your traditionalists. This is sort of where my grandma falls into, born between 1925 and 1942. Then you have the baby boomers that are from the 1943s to the 1964, which would sort of be my mother's generation. I fall in the Generation X, which is born from 1964 to 1981. And then we had the millennials that are from 1981 to 2002. And the millennial group is really the big chunk of what we are dealing with now. Now, for myself personally, I have 2 millennials now. I have one that is getting ready to be 20 in a couple of weeks, and then I have a 10-year-old. So I've got some different characteristics that I've seen in both of them that sort of lined up with this. So I looked at the different characteristics that were associated with each one of these generation groups. The silent, the traditionalists, these were the hard workers. These were the ones that appreciated traditional values. These were the ones that would get with an employer, stay with that employer, and would retire there. They were all into working hard, never considered to be very adventurous, and these are the ones that would prefer that traditional classroom, where you sat in the classroom, the instructor got up there, they spoke, you took notes, nobody really said anything except for the professor or instructor. Some of the other characteristics that with this traditionalist is that they were always into saving money. A lot of times it was a throwback from the Great Depression. They always wanted to be prepared for the next step. Education as a whole was considered a privilege. It was not something that everybody had, so if you were able to get an education, you were one of the elite. The baby boomers, which I said is like where my mom would fall into, is where they started becoming self-aware. I always say that I came from hippie parents. That's sort of the generation that I came from. And so they were very aware of their surroundings, aware of what was going on, always into social causes. These were the doers and the leaders, the ones that were ready to take on the next cause. This group also enjoys learning, whether it is from a traditional education background or if it's just learning about something new. They were always into expanding their horizons and following a new path or learning something new. Now, in the classroom, these would be opposed to those type of learning environments that the silent or the traditional group would actually be involved in. These would be the ones that would have an opposing idea. They would want to discuss, debate. If you think about some of the 60s and 70s eras when they were having protests, this is where they would come up with some of these ideas. Also, within this group is where that workaholic 50-plus hour work week actually was developed from. And so people were concerned with, having a good job, moving up the corporate ladder, staying with a company. They were much concerned about face time, that if you weren't there, then people did not think you were doing anything, and so you had to be active within their job. This group also introduced that idea of buy now, pay later. And so we started seeing a lot of the credit debt start to develop with this baby boomer era. And for this group, when it comes to education, they believed that it was their right, that everybody was deserving of an education and everybody should have an education. Now, the Generation X, where I come from, which I can talk a little bit more from a personal perspective, is we started seeing students that were more self-reliant. Remember, these are the students or the generation that comes out of those baby boomers. So they were used to their parents being gone, being away. And so they became very independent and very self-reliant. They became task-oriented. I know even as a child, my mom would leave me like a list of things that I had to do while she was gone working. And so out of that, these students were constantly looking for work-life balance, whether it was in their education, their homework, their coursework type, or if once they moved into their workplace, they would be looking for flexibility, not being gone the 50 hours and away from their families. This group looks for feedback. They want to know that what they're doing is relevant. They are not going to want to spend time doing tasks that they don't find to be a relevant portion of what they're doing. Once they understand the why perspective, then they are more likely to lead into completing those type of tasks. I know this for myself because even from my teaching style, I talk about the relevance. When I'm talking to students, I always give them the why. I always tell my students at the very beginning, I am a why person. Before we jump into the procedure of how to do something, we're going to understand the why. Because to me, in order to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it, you have to see where it fits into the big picture. One of the things that also came about with this Generation X is we started seeing a lack of people skills. Not sure really where that idea came from, but maybe where the kids were home, since they were the latchkey kids, not having as much interaction as previous. Now, when it comes to education, this group sees it as an end to a means. I can vouch for that myself. I know when I first started out in college that I started out in justice studies and psychology, but every job I had was an accounting job. And so after a while, you'd go in for a promotion, nobody would ever promote me because I didn't have a piece of paper that said I could do what I was actually doing. So I changed my major from psychology and legal studies and went over to accounting. And so again, it comes down to, they see it as just a way to, get those financials into place. This group also is the group that is willing to put the time that is necessary to complete the job. They're going to make sure the job is right. They're not going to rush through it and provide a half-done job. They're going to make sure that it's done right and be perfect before they move on. So then we end up with our millennials, where we are now. So what we're seeing in our classroom are often a generation that has been sheltered. These are our everybody gets a trophy kids. I know from my personal perspective, I have to have the conversation once or at least twice a semester about everybody doesn't get an A. Just because you turn in your assignment doesn't mean you get an A. And I have to sort of explain to them what that whole grade scale ends up looking like. So that's one of the things that they're looking for. These are actually very confident students, but they're also very reserved in the fact that if they don't know that they're right, they're not going to speak up. One of the things that I have been working on in my classroom now has been the idea that it is okay to be wrong. That is how we learn. I know I can ask a question in class sometimes and everybody's just dead silent. I know half of them know the answer, but they're not 100% confident that they know that answer, so they just all sit in silence. And so I'm just like, give me something. We can work with that. And so I've been working with them to understand it's okay to give the wrong answer. That wrong answer can lead us into another discussion, or it can provide us some new learning aspect. I always are constantly telling them that, making mistakes are how we actually learn. This group is also very competitive. I don't know if you have seen it in your classrooms. I know I've seen it in my classrooms, that they are very competitive. I don't discuss their grades, but they discuss their grades among each other, and I hear them constantly. One is always trying to outdo the other one. And so they're very competitive in that sense. We see a lot of them from the perspective that they are athletes, but it's the generation as a whole. They are also very team-oriented. Very seldom do you see in a classroom where they are separated. Most of the time, I know in my classrooms, I usually have little groups that will work together on assignments. This group is also our tech-savvy group, and I think we all know that. I was talking about in the whole beginning of this where my pet peeve is the phones in the classroom. And so these are the tech-savvy ones. And so we have to have something in there to bring out those pieces. This group, when it comes to the workplace, are going to be involved in social issues. So they're not only going to be trying to strive for that work-life balance, but they're also going to want that work-life social environment type balance. They're going to want to know that the work that they're doing, whether it's in our classrooms or it's in the workplace when they go in, that it has some type of meaning. They want to make a meaningful impact. This group is very in touch with global issues and diversity. And so, what do we do to take all of these ideas, because we don't come from this generation, but yet we need to reach them, because just as a parent, I think that my job is to raise children that will be productive members of society. Our roles as instructors and professors are to do the same thing, in the sense that we're trying to create individuals that will be productive society members in the workplace. This group has even worse communication skills than the baby boomer group does. And so one of the things that I do is I end up spending a lot of time in the classroom teaching them communication skills and what their expectations are. And I know that a lot of these ideas and these characteristics are being seen outside the classroom as they enter the workplace as well. I spent my last 6 years before going back into education in public accounting, and I have several of my colleagues that I still speak with, and as they get interns in or they get new associates in, they tell me about how self-absorbed they are, how they don't want to work, that they want to find the shortest way of doing something to get it done. They have no respect for authority. So where I come from in the audit world, we do inventories. And generally the rule is, whoever is on the low part of the totem pole, the first hire, has to do those inventory observations often on New Year's Eve. They have actually, this group that's coming in, has actually went in and told partners that they already had plans and they couldn't do that. And, the partners you're looking at probably come from that baby boomer generation, and they're like sort of floored that somebody would actually come out and say, I'm not going to do that. I don't have plans. And so I think as our role, understanding these characteristics, we need to be preparing our students for what the expectations are when they go out to the workplace. That it is not their place to tell the partner that they're not going to do something, that they have to work their way up, that this is part of learning the job. And so that's where those lack of communication skills come in. I've seen it in writing samples, where it looks like they've just made me one big text message or one big Facebook post. Or even in speaking, I had a student not too long ago come in my office and just plopped herself down at my desk and said, I was told you to sign me up in online class. And I'm just like, okay, well, who told you? She told me. Who is she? And it was like pulling teeth the entire time trying to figure out what exactly was going on, which I never really truly got a picture of what was supposed to be going on. I told her to have the person email me, which I never got, so I'm not even sure the story was true. But it was that lack of communication that they need to be learning. And I think it starts in the classroom. So then what can we do to take these to start to reach them? And some of the things that I saw when I started going through a lot of the research that I was looking at had 3 main ideas: to understand, engage, and connect. Understand relates back to understanding what your student is looking for. Understand the needs of the actual student. And this happens by, again, communication. You've got to talk with them. Ask them questions about what they think they're supposed to be learning, why they're there, and what they're hoping to achieve, or what they plan to achieve. And then, then it goes into engaging. This is where I said my classroom, I'm usually very interactive. I like my students to talk back and forth. I think, from an engaging perspective, and I think luckily because we're at a small college, we were able to do this, is being able to know all of your students by name. I always tell my Accounting 201 class, which usually has about 30 students in it each semester, that by week 3, my goal is to know everybody's name. And so far, I've done pretty good. Now, as I start to age and I've become a little senile, I might start forgetting. It's pretty sad. I can remember their names, but I can't remember my children's names. So getting them to do that, asking questions, using different types of methods, teamwork methods, getting them to do some presentations, clicker questions. I've never used the clicker questions. It's something I probably should try to get them to use their phones for something a little bit more engaging besides Facebook, but that's one way to get them to engage. The goal setting. Like I said, this group is very achievement-oriented, very competitive, but one of the things they've seen is that even though they want to achieve things, they're not really good at setting goals. They're very distracted, and you see that with all the different media that they have going on. And then to connect. Again, this is where it sort of leads into that engaging piece, because you're trying to get them to interact and make a connection. Whether it's a one-on-one connection with the student and the professor, or if it's a one-on-one connection with the student and another student. It's still getting that connection, improving those communication skills. Okay, so some of the things that I have done in the past that will focus on incorporating these strategies is, of course, teamwork. I think all of us are sort of doing that at this point. We're trying to get the teamwork pieces in there, doing some group work. But then I've also started working on assessment pieces. This sort of helps them set goals. One of the things that I've done in my Accounting 201 class that I think that's made a very big difference in the overall performance, and I've seen it over semester, is the fact that I have weekly quizzes. Every week they have a quiz that is very similar to what they did in middle school or maybe even lower school at this point, where they talked about multiplication tables, and you had to do the little time test for 1 minute and see how far you could get. Well, they do an account classification test. And I always sort of give them a goal. They take the first one and they may make a 50. Well, I tell them, okay, well, your goal is next week you should be shooting for a 60 or a 70, till ultimately by the end of the semester you're scoring 100. So I'm getting them engaged in that one. I'm sort of noticing who's getting it and who's not. We do a lot of competitions in my classes. I do it great for test review. We've done different games. I'm getting ready to actually do a Jeopardy game next week in my fraud class as they get ready to prepare for their exam on Friday. And that really sinks into their competitive nature that they have. So one of the things that I have started working on, which I've just done it this semester, so I'm sort of seeing how it works out, is I have started creating gold star charts. One of the jokes sort of in my class is every once in a while I will ask a question or somebody will bring up a really great point that connects one concept to another concept, and I always tell them, okay, great, you got the gold star for today. Well, this competitive group wants to see how many gold stars they're actually getting. And so this semester I have actually created gold star charts. So if you see me walking down the hall with a poster board with little gold stars on it, that's what it is. I'm taking it to class with me. And they can earn some extra points towards the end of the semester based on that. I'm also using it as a reinforcement tool, as if I see them playing on their phone or sleeping in class or doing something else, I take their gold stars. So it's been something that sort of, it seems very juvenile, but for this group, it actually works. I had a hard time finding gold stars at the beginning of the semester, and so they didn't think I was serious about having the gold star chart. And so last week I started seeing more phones come out, more lack of interest. I have the star charts this week, and everybody's back on keel, and they're sort of paying attention. So that's been sort of good. One of the things that I am going to do, I haven't done it yet, but I am going to do it probably later in the semester, is I'm going to sort of flip the classroom around, and instead of me making the interactive online quiz, because I think they have more technical skills than I probably do at this point, I'm going to give it to them to make a quiz for the class to take as part of their test review. And so I'm going to sort of flip it on them and sort of get them to start using their skills. One of the connect pieces that a lot of the research I looked at talked about was going back to that relevancy and making things seem relevant. And one of the things I'm working on for this semester is going and getting some of our previous graduates. In accounting, our graduates have sort of went in different directions. Some of them have went into industry and started working. Some of them have went on to graduate school. Some of them have worked, then gone on to graduate school. And so I want to get a round table of different graduates to sort of share their experience and share what they learned in their coursework actually applies to what they're going to do in the future, and how it's going to apply to, wherever they decide to go, because in accounting there's a wide range of areas. I'm going to continue to strive to push that idea of it's okay to be wrong. That's another thing that I'm going to continue to work on. I heard something sort of interesting when I went to my middle school son's open house. They do a move-up night where the parents go to the next grade to see what they're going to do in the next year. And so he'll be going into middle school next year. And the science teacher was talking about that he gives a fail test to the class every year. He said this is a test that nobody can pass. Everybody will fail it. Because there are so many, and remember we're talking about this millennial group. There are so many that are in that group that if they get a 92, they're going to fall apart. And so he's trying to teach them, you have a bad day some days. Some days just things don't go your way. You don't understand everything. And it's okay if you have a bad day. You can recover from it. And so I find it interesting that now in middle school they're trying to enhance and embrace those same concepts that, it's okay to be wrong. Now, so in the future, how I'm looking to use some of this information is I want to develop some of my own research. I would like to, start working with students on trying to do some goal setting, teaching them how to set goals and then how to measure those goals. So, at the beginning of the semester, asking them, what do you hope to achieve here? And then working with them a little by little, how do you plan to achieve it? You want an A in the course? Okay, what are the steps are you going to take to get that? Because so many in this millennial group do not know how to do that. They want the shortcut. They want the shortcut in order to get to where they want to be. So I would like to know, what they're doing. I want to work with them on that goal setting piece to understand where they plan to go, what they are wanting to achieve. Another thing, because one of the things when it talks about connecting and engaging, it talks about with the millennial group, since they're so tech savvy and they sort of operate on their own hours, that we need some value content in our disciplines that is readily available to them. Right now I put my PowerPoints out there, some of them are interactive, but one of the things that I would like to do is actually start doing some videos of some of the hot topics, especially in our accounting field, talking about what the financial statements are, what the account classifications are, how they all fit together. Not a whole accounting class, but those hot topics that are there. And I think that these will sort of improve what we're seeing in the classroom and sort of help better prepare this millennial group as they go out. So this is some of the things that I have observed. Like I said, I'm still sort of working on some of this. Would you mind sharing with me what you have observed in the classroom, what you have struggled with?
Text messaging came out because in the past students would talk on the phone in class, so they'd get down there real low and talk.
Oh, then I'd really go crazy.
No, like I had a student one time broke up with his girlfriend class. Lots of fun. Please leave the fun outside and finish it up. Texting is, of course, that's a big problem, and I like what you come up with.
I mean, I remember when I was, as an auditor, I remember when the smartphones were finally approved for company use, because before we couldn't use any type of smartphones. I think the BlackBerry was the first thing that came up. I am not the tech person. That would be my husband. But I remember that they finally had approved that we could use them, and they had set up security passage, and you had to go through a whole IT security thing, because that was the whole thing. You didn't want your client information to be just out there. And it finally got approved, and I think everybody in our office ended up getting a smartphone, and it was just going to be this great thing, because now we could stay in touch with clients and we could respond to them immediately. Well, then we would have meetings and nobody was paying attention because they were on their phone the whole time. It's one of the things that drives me absolutely insane. To me, it's a disrespect type thing, and I know this millennial group doesn't see it as that. They think they're these great multitaskers, that they can get on their phones and do all these text messages and do Facebook and yet still understand what I'm saying. And that's why 9 out of 10 of them will turn around and say, "What did you just tell me to do?" And so sometimes I repeat it, sometimes I don't. It just depends on what mood I'm in that day. So, I mean, they don't think that it's an interference, but it is. And I would love to see, I know I can't change everything, but I would love to see, as they go into the workplace, that the norm starts turning around, and when you go into a meeting, you put your phone down and not trying to do 10 or 12 other things. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else? I know you have issues in the classroom.
I don't allow cell phone into my classroom because I don't carry my own cell phone. So if I can manage hour and a half without my cell phone, I think they can manage as well. Some of them don't take it very well, which is okay. They seem agitated that they cannot do something. But they have to bring their calculator, so they have to do some calculation. So that works for me.
Okay.
But I think they're surviving for the most part. I mean, every once in a while I have to throw someone out and say, "Use your cell phone."
Well, I take mine just because I've got 2 little ones. I think everybody has seen at least the girl running around. That, if Matt's in class, or if, so that somebody can get up with us just for emergency. I've also have responsibility of my grandmother, so I keep it on me for that reason. So I do let them, and I tell them, I understand emergencies happen, and if you have an emergency call, take it out. But then I also, during class time, I let them use it for calculations anytime that we do calculations. Only in class, not on the test. I bring calculators for the test. I already got burned on that one time. But I've seen all kinds of different strategies, from making them turn their cell phone in as they walk in the door, to putting them in these like little shoe hanger looking things. And I just don't have time for that. That just seems like a lot of trouble to have to go around and collect everybody's cell phone, because then I'm sure somebody's going to claim that something happened to it while it was in my care. And so at some point, like you said, they've got to learn just to let it go. That 30 minutes, an hour and a half, the world won't end.
I sort of copied the cell phone policy with my colleagues, that, okay, they're to remain put away, and you may be asked to leave to lose a letter grade on the next test, and you have it out. And the degree of enforcement, generally isn't, but, I just let them know at the beginning of the semester the policy is in place. And if it gets too out of hand, I said it's really easy to tell when somebody, I say, it's amazing what you can see up here. And my sister had this great meme that she sent me. It's like, students, I know when they're texting in class, seriously, nobody just looks down at their crotch and smiles. If I see somebody doing it, a lot of times I'll just make an embarrassing joke and I'll say, "This is so exciting, so-and-so's texting all their friends about it." Usually that will kind of like...
My upper level classes are great because I know just about every single one of them, and I'm very quick to, like you said, call them out on, whatever they happen to be doing at that time. So yeah, I think they usually kills it really quickly.
I didn't understand or didn't know the extent of the issue with cell phone, and that's a bit off topic because I'm going to talk about driving, but driving home every day for about an hour and 15 minutes, I would say 9 out of 10 drivers sit there with their phone driving at the same time. It scares me because eventually innocent person is going to get involved in the car accident because someone doesn't pay attention. It's just completely out of hand.
Well, so I think you're exactly right. I think it goes beyond just what happens in the classroom. I think the classroom is just a starting point, and that's what I'm saying. If we can expand out, if we start laying those ground rules and start showing him that this is what the social norm is, that hopefully it will make a difference, hopefully. That, it's not acceptable. Talking about those differences in generations, there's a new TV show that just came out, The Great Indoors, and it's a sitcom, and it has millennial age group that is working in the office, and there's one that's like a blogger, and she works like 2 hours a day, and that's all she does, and she's so tired, and the manager is from the Gen X, and so he's like trying to get him to do work, and he doesn't understand why after 2 hours of work they're all leaving for the day, and why they're all on Facebook half the time. And it's been sort of interesting to sort of watch it, and them talking about those difference in the characteristics. And I always think about it, that's what we need to be preparing our students for, that when they go out to the workplace, they're not going to act the same as what they are accustomed to and what they think that is going on. Everybody else isn't looking to have that 2-hour job. Most of them are there 8, 10, 12 hours.
So I know a lot of cell phones, and I just mark them as absent if I see their phone out, and they know that. But I do allow laptops, and I noticed last semester, not this semester, when we was actually doing quite well in the course, but he made a point to sit way back in the corner, and he had his laptop out, and I'm going to call myself tech savvy. I don't have a smartphone, but I actually know how they work. So I think it's savvy on the other side of it. I feel like you have to accept some level of technology. But I'm just not looking forward to the day when cell phones are considered to be okay. It's not going to happen in my class. You have a small class. What do you need clickers for? Why don't we just talk?
And I think that's the best way. To me, I think that sort of goes back to my generation. We're talkers. We want to talk about everything. But I agree. I do a lot of laptops too. There's, especially like my advanced accounting class. In the real world, all your worksheets are done in Excel. When you're trying to do a consolidation process, you do it in Excel. It makes no sense to me to teach them how to do it on paper. Because if they go sit for the CPA exam, they're going to be given an Excel sheet to sort of do it on. When they go out into the real world, they're going to be expected to use it. So I do the same thing. I bring in the laptops, but then I have to watch and you usually can tell. You usually can tell when they're doing something outside of what you're doing. I hate teaching in the GTC computer labs. I absolutely despise it. And if there's ever a semester or a day that I throw a hissy fit in the classroom and get really mad at the students, it's when I'm standing up there talking and all I hear is click, 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 click. And I typically will always stop and say, I don't understand why I keep hearing all this clicking noise, because I'm talking and you should be listening to me. And usually the way I am, if I start getting in my little spells like that, they like turn the computers off and they know they've already sort of pushed it too far. But I think we have to have the tech in the classroom for those reasons. When I talk to employers, this is one of the reasons why I sort of changed the way that we do our accounting information systems class. Because I was talking to so many, and I saw it even when I was still in public accounting, they couldn't use Excel. They were hard coding all the numbers in. Well, from an auditor's perspective, when we have to go back and review their work, that doesn't help us because I can't see what numbers that you've put together. And so I've changed our accounting information systems class so that a part of the class actually spends working on Excel and learning how to do the formatting, learning how to do pivot tables, learning how to actually use the formula bar. And so from that perspective, I agree, we've got to bring those pieces of the technology in the classroom, but I don't know if it's necessarily the cell phone itself.
Comment about Excel is telling. We have laptops in the chemistry laboratory. I use them much in Gen Chem in the fall, but I use them a lot in the spring. And they'll have an opportunity to manipulate some data in Excel. And it's very interesting to me how segregated that knowledge is, that a few people will have encountered it someplace and will actually know how to use it, and the majority will have no clue. It'll be the first time they've ever seen it. And I guess when we used to have this introduction to Microsoft applications, and we decided a few years ago that, oh, they all know how to use these things, we don't have to learn them anymore, but they don't. They don't know how to format in Word, they don't know how to write formulas in Excel. The PowerPoint is the one thing where they do tend to have skills, and that's probably what's being taught in the public schools.
I just find it amazing when this group is supposed to be the tech savvy, that they're supposed to be able to do all of these different things that their public education or their primary education is supposed to be preparing them to do these things. And we're finding out that they really don't have that preparation. I just finished my accounting information systems class, just turned in their first project, which was no more than taking some financial statements that were completely formatted. I mean, they were literally just financial statements. And they were supposed to put them in Excel and format them exactly the way they saw them in the paper. Because in public accounting, when we create financial statements for a client, we put them in Excel, then copy paste in to Word, but they start out into an Excel format. And I've already started looking at them. They don't know how to use left align, center. They've hard-coded numbers instead of like adding the columns, and it's just amazing to me. And it just amazes me how unprepared they're going to be when they end up going into the workforce.
It sounds to me sort of like there's a bigger underlying issue. We're talking all about technology, and I'll preface by saying the amount of technology you need to bring in Excels and things varies wildly whether you're teaching Shakespeare or accounting. But to be savvy at anything, you have to have done focused learning. And that's where I feel the biggest problem is that kids are not being allowed or pushed to focus on one thing. So this is where I get into trouble, where I read all this pedagogy that you should do flipped classes, and you should have videos, and you should have group work, and every 15 minutes they should get up and do jump And regular lecturing doesn't work. But we all learn what we learn through someone standing there and helping us, and now it's more interactive. You ask them to, what's the answer to da-da-da. But the problem is that they're can't focus long enough on anything. Taking our classes and making them very unfocused, to me, doesn't seem the answer to fixing the whole problem in the first place. And so this group has an issue, but I don't think we should cave to their issue to try to fix their issue. I think maybe going back to some of the old silent traditionalists will perhaps have the answer to fix some of the issues.
And I agree, because that's one of the things that I did say about them, that they are unfocused. They want achievements, but they're not focused. They can't set goals and measure how they actually get there. All they know is they want to get there now. Right now, not tomorrow, not next week, but now, like within the next 5 minutes. And I think that that's where we have to come in, and we can give them some of the interaction that they're looking for. But at the same time, they need to learn some of those traditional styles and those traditional ideas that there is no shortcut to learning a lot of this information. There's no shortcuts in accounting to learn the information. I used to always tell students, I have a whole little list of, when we start doing journal entries, I have a list of rules, and I give them, you ask yourself these questions. What is happening? Is this account increasing or decreasing? And it's a very long process. But I told them, I said, I understand it's a long process, but you have to go through the process to get the answer right. And some of them, of course, don't do that, and then they don't do very well in the class either. And I tell them, after a while, it becomes second nature, and you start just automatically asking yourself those questions. But I think, there is something to be said for how traditional teaching worked. That's why I started doing those weekly quizzes. Because it gave them something, for one, to see some achievement, which they needed to see, and then two, it goes back down to a traditional style.
Distinction needs to be made between computer comfortable and tech savvy, because as you say, I'm always surprised by like their lack of knowledge. And that one of the places that shows up the most is searching for credible literature, searching for credible databases, and that's where the librarians. It's kind of like you ask them to research scientific sources, peer-reviewed publications, and they'll do a Google search.
You mean Wikipedia is not that scholarly source that you're looking for? That's what I have that argument in class quite a bit too. That
if you're lucky, maybe get them to do Google Scholar. Like spreadsheets is a prime example. It's kind of like, they're familiar with computers, they're very comfortable with computers, but there are lots of specific areas of technology.
I agree. Everything that I read always says tech savvy, but I agree. It's more that they're comfortable in front of the screen. They're comfortable doing the search. They're comfortable communicating with their friend on Facebook or through a text message than they are one-to-one. That when my oldest son was going through high school, it really bothered me in the beginning because he never had any friends over. And so I got really concerned that my child wasn't liked because there was nobody ever there, but yet you would walk by his room and you would hear him yelling at one of his friends, playing an online game in which they were interacting. And I had said something to him one day, and he was like, well, yeah, we talk all the time. I was like, well, when? You don't go and do it. He goes, oh, we go play this game all the time, and we text, and we do all these different things. And the more I started talking to parents, that's what they were saying. What I did at his age when, you went out on Friday night, Saturday night, and then you had to do your homework on Sunday, they're not doing that. I mean, my son was home probably 90% of the time, which I won't complain, but, it was just an entirely different world, but it was being in front of the screen. I mean, I know where they go to school, they start, middle school, they start with tablets, and they have them all the way up until they graduate. And so they're already getting into that. I know even in elementary school, my youngest is doing a lot of Khan Academy that's been incorporated. They've worked with Prezi presentations. And so he's doing a lot even at 10 years old. But again, I think it's more in front of the screen versus being technologically savvy. Any other comments, questions?
I'm never sure how much class time is appropriate to sacrifice to teach the sort of learning style I want them to emulate. So much of the texts we use are texts that are often very rich and require contemplation. They require time and quiet and focus and all the things that this generation seems to struggle with. So I assigned in one of my classes a work of religious art, and the assignment was to just take it home and stare at it for half an hour, and then we'll talk about it. Because you don't get the meaning in advance, and you need to spend time with it. So the next day it was clear no one had done that.
You asked way too much.
So we spent half an hour in class in silence just looking at this thing, but then I felt guilty because I don't feel like I'm being paid to just sit there in silence. So trying to find that balance. If they're not going to do it on their own, then do we just sort of leave those people behind and proceed with the ones who will, or do we slow down to accommodate everybody? Anyway, I'm sure there's no neat answer, but that's a struggle, I think.
But I think it's a struggle everybody has. I mean, I've sort of set up like a schedule of how I probably cover each chapter. I have like, one day where I talk. I'm in the traditional style. I do the talking. I give them the examples. And then it's probably the next 2 class periods that they end up doing the work and start applying what I have. But I struggle with the same thing that you do, because I'm often thinking, well, how many days do I give them to do this? Because it seems like it's taking us forever to get through this process. I had it happen in my cost accounting class today. I gave them a quiz that I thought was going to only last like 10, 15 minutes, and it took some almost the whole class period. Well, I just lost half of my day. And so I struggle with I like quizzes because I like that assessment piece, to give them that automatic feedback, whether they're doing good, whether they're getting it or not. But then how much class time am I actually sacrificing doing that, giving them that quiz? So it's still a balance. I do appreciate everybody coming. I hope you did find something interesting.